is the Torah? This is a question I get all the time. Is the Torah the 5 books of Moses? Is the Torah the Tanach, which includes the prophets and the scriptures, which is the Ksuvim? So there's Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. There's the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, and Nevi'im is the book of the prophets, like the books of Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, and then all the prophets, Yeshaya, Isaiah, Yecheskel, Ezekiel, and the 12 prophets as well. And then there's the book of Kesuv, the books of Kesuvim, which includes the books of King Solomon, like Mishlei and Tehillim. The Megillas are included in the Kesuvim and the scriptures, and there's 24 books in total, and that's considered to be the written Torah. But when you say Torah, do we mean all 24 books, or do we mean specifically the 5 books of Moshe? And do we consider the oral Torah, the narration, the commentaries, the Jewish law, and the code of Jewish law, the Talmud, the Mishnah, the books of Kabbalah, do we consider all that as equally holy as part of the Torah? And this is a question that has many people perplexed sometimes, especially from outside of Judaism looking in, as well as within the Jewish community. So I want to use this class to clarify some of those points and the importance of the complete unity of Torah. So let us start with a mitzvah that we have towards the end of the Torah in the Parshas Vayelech, which is talking about the portion of Ha'azinu, and it's a very interesting mitzvah, one that is very perplexing as well, but it gives us a lot of insight into how we're supposed to view the Torah. One interesting tidbit I will say, just to start off with the answer a little bit: Jewish law can only be learned from the 5 books of Moses. In other words, every single one of the 613 commandments that we have elaborated throughout the Oral Torah, the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Talmud, Maimonides, and Code of Jewish Law, and the many others, all 613 mitzvos that we practice are originating, and they are all listed in the 5 books of Moses. They're coded, but they're listed in the 5 books of Moses, and what we know is the Torah. The Tanach, the Nevi'im, the Ksuvim, the prophets, and the scriptures are still written Torah, holy, but we don't learn commandments from them. We learn lessons, we learn values, we learn many other things, but the Jewish law can only be derived from the 5 books of Moses. So here's the mitzvah. Here's the mitzvah in its purest form. This is from the end of the portion Vayelech, right before the portion of the Ha'azinu, which is known to be the song, the 52 verses of the song of Moshe before he passed away. So what does it say? You have to write this song, which doesn't just mean the song, but it means the entire Torah, and teach it to the children of Israel. Place it in their mouths, so that the song will be my witness for the children of Israel. Once again, this is a mitzvah. This is one of the 613 mitzvahs. This is a perfect example. This is one of the 613 mitzvahs, is to write a Torah. Now, it does not say write a Torah in the verse. It says write the song. So if you don't have the commentaries, which we'll see in a minute, to explain you that this song actually means the Torah, we would not know how to fulfill this mitzvah. Another example that we don't have on the screen is, but we will get to it soon, is it says in the Shema, which is also in Deuteronomy in the beginning, it says that you should write on the doorposts of your homes. Write on the, doesn't say what we should write, and it doesn't say exactly where on our doorposts. We know through the explanations of the commentaries of the coded messages in the Torah that the sages were able to derive that it means write the portion of Shema, the first two portions of Shema, on a scroll, and we place it in a very specific spot on our doorposts, and that's how we fulfill the mitzvah. So every commandment originates in the Torah, but it's explained and elucidated throughout the commentaries and what we know as the Oral Torah. So now, here is the mitzvah from that verse. Here's the finality of that mitzvah. Maimonides is explaining how that mitzvah that we just read about writing the song, what does it mean writing the song? So here's what he says. It is a positive commandment for every Jewish man to write a Torah scroll for personal use. So this doesn't mean to write a Torah and then donate it to a synagogue. It means to write your own personal Torah. Why? Where do we learn this from? The verse that we just read. And you now write this song for yourself. So what does the Rambam say? And of course, it's not his own words. He's quoting from the Talmud. This does not just refer to the song, but it also refers to the entire Torah, which includes this song. This is inferred from the law that a Torah may not be written in sections, because if you say it's just to write the song, you're not allowed to write down just one little section of the Torah on a parchment and call it a Torah because it's incomplete. So the Rambam basically clarifies that this mitzvah means is that we all have an obligation to write an entire Torah scroll for ourselves, personal use. So comes the question, none of us do this. None of us are even, most of us are probably not even a scribe or know how to write like a scribe to write a Torah. We have to, there's not a single scribe in Charlotte. When you want to have your mezuzahs checked or have your tefillin checked, you have to send them to a scribe. We send them to a scribe in New York or in Miami or in one of these other places that have, an abundance of scribes who know how to fix and know how to understand what the laws of every letter is and how to fix them. So none of us are scribes. None of us have Torah scrolls at home, do we? I don't. So here we have a positive commandment that we're supposed to fulfill, and none of us do it. So what's going on? So let's break this down. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the core of what this mitzvah is, what it represents, and how it's meant to be fulfilled. So the Rambam made it clear that the mitzvah is to write an actual scroll. Not only that, the Rambam goes on, and this, by the way, is halacha. This is considered to be the accepted law. Even if your ancestors, let's say you inherited a Torah, or you were in the same vein if you were gifted a Torah, especially if you were gifted a Torah, you still have to write a separate Torah for yourself, because it says in the commandment, hisfu lachem, you have to write that Torah. If you write a scroll by hand, it is considered as if you received it on Mount Sinai, because when you write that scroll, according to the laws of the scribe of how the Torah should be written, with the right letters and the crowns and the right words and everything else, it's as if you received the Torah from Mount Sinai. Now, here's the practical side. If you don't know, or if you're not a scribe, let's say your hand, like my hands are my handwriting is terrible. So even if I learned the laws of how to be a scribe and I learned how to use a feather and learned how to use the ink, the Torah would be unreadable. My handwriting is so bad, my hands are shaky. So even if you take the time to learn how to be a scribe, it's very possible that you won't be able to fulfill this mitzvah. So what are you supposed to do? You're allowed to commission someone else to write the Torah for you, but it has to be written for you. So you can't just go buy a Torah. You have to commission the Torah to be written for you. Now here comes the final practical practice of this mitzvah, and this is the actual way we practice this mitzvah, because every single letter in the Torah is important. And as we know, if one letter is cracked or one letter is missing or one letter is written if one letter is not properly written, the entire Torah is not considered to be a kosher Torah. It is demoted to the value of a chumash, like a book printed on paper. It doesn't have the holiness of a Torah. And when you fix that letter, or you add that letter, you fix the Torah to include all the letters the way they're meant to be, then the Torah becomes kosher. So if you fix that one letter, it's as if you wrote the entire Torah. Not only that, but if a Torah is in the middle of being written, if you purchase or if you commission one of the letters to be written on your behalf, it's as if you wrote the entire Torah. So the way we practice this mitzvah is when a child is born, as soon as a child is born, we purchase a letter from a Torah there's always a Torah being written somewhere in the world. So we purchase a letter in a Torah. Usually you just pay $1 and that's how you buy a letter. And the letter is written with that person's name in mind. And the child gets a certificate that they have a letter in the Torah, which letter it is. You could obviously purchase more than one if you want, but as long as you purchase one, that's how you fulfill this mitzvah. And if this hasn't been done for you when you were a child, you should obviously do this as an adult. At the end of the class, we'll have a QR code on a website where you could easily purchase a letter in the Torah, and that's how you fulfill this mitzvah. So as hard as it sounds to write your own Torah, there's actually a way to fulfill it that's not so hard, especially in today where we're able to just easily find out who's writing a Torah, where a Torah is being written, and make sure that we purchase a letter, that we have a letter that is attributed to us, that we commissioned, and that's how you write it, and that's considered as if you wrote the entire Torah. So that's how we fulfill the mitzvah. But we're going to dive into it a little bit deeper because we obviously want to learn some of the thought process behind this mitzvah, the reasoning behind this mitzvah, and more importantly, some questions we have about this mitzvah. So first, in coming to this conclusion that we just read about the Rambam of how the mitzvah is supposed to be performed, so the Talmud has a lot of discussion back and forth to get us to that point. So here's one of those discussions. Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Abba, taught in the name of Rabbi Gidal, who taught in the name of Rav, that if you purchase a Torah, remember we said that earlier, that if you inherit a Torah, it's not considered, you have to still write a Torah of your own, and added that if you purchase a Torah, it's just as bad. He says that if you purchase a completed Torah scroll from the market, it's like you're snatching a mitzvah from the market stall. You're basically denying yourself the opportunity to do the mitzvah. So by buying a Torah, it's a nice thing, you should buy a Torah, but you're not fulfilling the mitzvah by buying a Torah. You have to either write or commission the writing of it, so it's the writing of it that makes the mitzvah whole. It's not the owning of the Torah, it's the writing of the Torah. And therefore, you have to have that letter commissioned for you before it's written. You have to have the Torah, if you want to do a full Torah, you have to have the whole Torah commissioned for you as it's being written, not just purchasing it once it's complete. This is why when we write a new Torah for our synagogue, and we've done this 3 times here at Chabad, is we celebrate the beginning of the Torah. In other words, we celebrate the writing of the first few letters, because we want that the entire Torah should be written with the synagogue in mind and the people that are supporting it in mind. And at the end, we have another celebration, and the main celebration is at the end. But we make sure to have the celebration in the beginning, so the Torah should be written with the congregation and the community in mind as it's being written, because there's a mitzvah, there's a special connection to that Torah when it's being written for a specific individual or community. And as we have here on the last line from the Talmud, that when you write a Torah scroll, it's the equivalent of receiving the Torah from Mount Sinai. Okay, let us look at a halachic debate, and this is a halachic debate amongst the commentaries on the Talmud. Rashi disagrees with the Rambam. The Rambam says that if you purchase a Torah or inherit a Torah, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Rashi disagrees, and Rashi over here says that if you purchase a Torah, you fulfilled the mitzvah, but you're missing out on the main point. In other words, by purchasing a Torah, you've actually fulfilled the mitzvah. You've checked off the box, but you could have accomplished so much more had you commissioned the writing or written it yourself. And there's other commentaries as well. The Rebbe is going to try to explain how all of them really agree, but we're going to get to that soon. So let's dive into the idea of writing the Torah versus studying the Torah, because ultimately, logically, the purpose of writing the Torah, what does it say back in that first text that we read? Let's go back to the first text from Deuteronomy, the first text from the mitzvah. It says, write this song, which is the Torah, for yourself and teach it to the children of Israel. What does it say next? Is that you should place it in their mouths, that they should be able to study Torah. And why? Because the Torah is a witness of God's existence and God's connection to us for the children of Israel. So the purpose of this mitzvah is to study Torah and to be God's witness of God's creation of the world and God's connection to the Jewish people, of giving us the Torah, taking us out of Egypt, giving us the land of Israel, and so on and so forth. So it's the witness, the Torah scroll is the witness, and therefore we have to write. But if you look at the end game here of what Hashem's end game is he wants us to study Torah, and he wants us to bear witness to God's existence by having the Torah. So why is the writing of it so important, to the point that some will say that if you purchase a completed Torah, it says you're not really fulfilling the mitzvah. Shouldn't the most important thing be that we just study it? Shouldn't that be the main focus, that we have to purchase it? Who cares who wrote it or how it was written? Just purchase it and study the Torah every single day. Isn't that what matters? Keep it fluent in your mouth. Keep it as a witness, a reminder of our connection to God. That's what's most important, right? So who cares who wrote it? Why is the Torah stressing that the writing of it is so important? So now we're going to go into the idea of what is Torah and why the oral narration of Torah is just as important as the written Torah, and why you cannot separate scripture from the commentaries and from the Talmud and from the Kabbalah and from the Medrash. It's all one united thing. And even though, yes, there are specific laws that we only learned the 613 mitzvahs from the 5 books of Moses, and we from the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and we do not learn them from the Nach, but the Nach is, in other words, the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim are still holy books. They're 24 holy books. And the written Torah, and there's different rules as we see here on the screen to the written Torah and the oral Torah. But as far as the validity, as far as the holiness, as far as the connection to God, as far as the bear witness, the what we're supposed to keep fluent, it's all one package deal. So let's start with this interesting commandment. And this is the Talmud elaborates on this in the Tractate of Gittin. Anything that was given to us in writing, such as the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, what we know as the Torah, as well as the books of the prophets, which was also given to us in writing, as well as the Kesuvim, which is the scriptures, the Megillas, the books of King Solomon, were also given to us in writing. And these are the 24 books that were written with divine inspiration. They were not just written by a human; they were written through God's divine revelation to that individual, or to that prophet, which means that it's really the word of God. But it was given to us in a written manner. We're not allowed to memorize them by heart. This is an interesting thing. Technically speaking, the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms, which is part of the written Torah, which is part of the scripture, the Kesuvim, we're not supposed to study it by heart. It has to be read from the book because it was given to us in writing, and therefore it's about saying it word for word from the book. By the way, because it's written Torah, therefore, even if we recite Tehillim, recite the book of Psalms, and don't understand it, it's still considered as if we said holy words, and we're still connecting to God through it because it's written Torah. If you do that with, let's say, Mishnah or Talmud, that's oral Torah, and just read the words without understanding it, you don't accomplish that because that is not given to us written, it's given to us orally, and it's more important to understand it than it is to read it. However, the parts of the Torah that were taught to us orally, and by the way, every single book from the books of the Medrash, the books of Kabbalah, the books of Chassidus, the books of commentary, the books of Jewish law, every single thing was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. It just wasn't revealed to the Jewish people until the generations later. But every single holy book that you could find you find as a book considered to be a book of Torah was given to Moshe at Mount Sinai, and he taught it to the people then to pass it down orally, generation to generation, until the time came for someone to transmit it, someone to write it down and to record it. But though all those teachings were not allowed to be transcribed, so technically speaking, it was illegal to record the book of the Mishnah. It was illegal to record the book of the Talmud. It was illegal to record the books of Medrash and everything else, which obviously we have those books in print. So how are we allowed to do that? So now we're going to dive into this concept a little bit, and this is where we're going to take one of the most important messages. Let's talk about the stages for a minute before we get into the answer, because this is really the crux of the answer. God did not want to give us a Torah, and this is what Kabbalah explains. God did not want to give us the Torah as here's the complete package, here's the complete Torah, take it and follow it. God wanted the human being to be partners in the evolution and in the revelation of the Torah throughout the generations and throughout the history of the Jewish people. The Torah was not meant to be a one-time, here it is, take it. There was intention by design, by God's design, to have the sages of each generation be a part in the development of the Torah, to bring it down to reality of every unique situation, to ensure that the Torah is not just a spiritual, holy item that is godly, but it actually relates and connects and unites with the natural limitations of the world and the natural elements of the world. And how is that done? Through practicing the Torah in every generation, in every unique situation, in every natural environment that we have. So let's take technology now is another element of natural science and design, and we apply the Torah within technology. We apply the same Torah principles throughout the entire evolution of Earth and of the world. How do we do that? So God doesn't expect us to be somehow miracle workers or prophets. God gave us a gift. And what was the gift? The sages. In every generation, God gave us individuals, some through their own effort, or some by divine gift by God, that they were born with, their soul being much more revealed than the rest of us, even though we all have the same soul, but they were the role model for what we could become. Those sages who, with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, were able to ensure the core principles and the core values of the Torah and the core intentions of the Torah were united with the reality on the ground of what we were facing. And that's why, even today, when you have a halachic question to a modern situation, such as, can you use an air fryer, which is a relatively new kitchen appliance? Can you use the same air fryer for meat items and milk items? Like, obviously not together, but could you use the same air fryer? Could you kosherize an air fryer? And the same Torah principles that were practiced thousands of years ago could answer that question through the rabbinic interpretation of the knowledge of the core values of the law. Is that what is considered to be a mixture of meat and dairy? Does steam count? If the steam from the dairy mixed with the steam of the meat, does that count as a mixture or not? And we apply those same principles to answer the questions. That is bringing Torah down to the reality of today's world with an air fryer. That's just one example. But throughout our history, throughout the days of the temple, the sages were the ones that brought down the Torah principles into the reality of the world, both on a practice level, on a Jewish law level, as well as on a midrashic level, which is learning lessons and learning from the Torah to practical to modern times, or at least the modern times for them when the Medrash was recorded. From a Kabbalistic level, learning the spiritual deepest secrets of God and applying them to the world, as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did, to teach us the value and the importance of recognizing godliness in everything. The Kabbalah books that were written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana, and eventually by many other sages later on, these are all teachings to Moshe at Mount Sinai, but they were being revealed by these sages in a way that they could relate to the times of their generation. As we know from the famous story in the Talmud, when there was a debate between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer about a specific law in Tumah and Tara, and purity and impurity. And Rabbi Eliezer was a spiritualist. He was very holy and very removed from the natural world. But he understood things the way they were in a spiritual way. And his opinion about when something becomes pure or impure was different to the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, who was much more down to earth and understood the reality of the world much better. And their debate about when something becomes pure or impure was contrasting the spirituality of it versus the reality. And they were debating, and there were sages on both sides that were taking sides. And Rabbi Eliezer, who was a very, very holy man, shouted out, if God agrees with me, let the rivers go the other way. And it happened. Let the tree, he announced many things that happened, many miracles that happened, to show that God is on his side. And in fact, to the point where Rabbi Eliezer said, if God is with me, let the walls of this study hall start caving in. And the walls started caving in. And Rabbi Yeshua looked at the walls and said, who are you? Who gives you permission to involve yourself in a halachic debate? And Rabbi Yeshua answered to all the miracles that Rabbi Eliezer was performing, saying, the Torah is not determined in heaven. The Torah was given to us even though the sages had a Ruach HaKodesh, they had divine inspiration, but their halachic interpretation, their way they brought it down to Jewish law, was by bringing it to their physical brains and physical reality, understanding it in reality, and then being able to interpret it in reality. Obviously, keeping true to the core value and the core essence of the law, but being able to understand it and translate it into the reality. And that was the gift of the sages. So the Torah and the interpretations of the sages are one of the same. It's God's way of partnering with the human being, of giving us the gift of the Torah, the core of the Torah, the values of the Torah, the code of the written Torah, and then having the sages in every generation elucidate and reveal the godliness within all the different elements of the books that were written, and having those permeate the reality of the world in a way that's different for every generation. So the Torah doesn't change, but the way it's packaged, the way it's perceived, the way it's understood and practiced to every unique thing that happens in the world is different. And that is unique to the sages of each generation. So The Gemara in Gittin that we just read tells us that the written Torah in its pure form has to be read. It cannot be memorized by heart. And the oral narrations of the Torah need to be only oral. They cannot be recorded on paper. However, one unique sage whose name was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, or some call him Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the holy Rabbi, who was arguably one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time. His lifetime was probably 100 Common Era, and it was several years after the Bar Kokhba rebellion when Judaism was in shambles. There were Jews exiled to Rome. There was a huge Jewish community in Babylonia. There were very few Jews left in Judea at the time. That's also around the time when the Romans renamed Judea to Palestina to humiliate the Jews that were still there. There were already Jews in Northern Europe, or at least wherever the Roman Empire was. It was a very difficult time. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi sensed that the Torah, the principles of the Torah, the oral Torah, are being forgotten. They're until now, everybody knew exactly what the oral Torah was. They knew the Jewish law, they knew the Medrash, they knew Kabbalah, they knew it all. It was all on the tip of their tongues. But now that Judaism and Jews were spread around the world much greater, Rabbi Yehuda feared that the Torah would be forgotten. And therefore, he broke the rules, obviously with God's permission, because he's Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. We can't break the rules, but he could. And he recorded the book of the Mishnah. Now, the book of the Mishnah by no means is the complete work of halacha or the complete work of the oral Torah, but at least it's a guide. It's a north star. It's a guide to ensure that the Torah, the principles of the oral Torah, are united with the essence of the written Torah. And therefore, he wrote down the Mishnah, which eventually led to the discussions of the Talmud, which were eventually revealed through the Talmud. The same goes with the books of Kabbalah and the books of Medrash, were eventually all transcribed because there was the only way to ensure that it wouldn't be forgotten. So the Rambam explains this as well. Why did the holy Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi transcribe the oral tradition rather than leave things the way they always were, against the rules? So what does he say? Because he observed that the number of students were progressively shrinking while the difficulties were progressively increasing, and the wicked Roman kingdom was expanding throughout the world and growing increasingly stronger. Jews were wandering about and relocating to distant locations. He therefore composed the Mishnah, a compilation of Jewish law for all to study so that it would not be forgotten. So he basically compromised an important rule in order to save the Torah. As we know, sometimes we have to make a sacrifice in order to say, for the greater cause of saving the Torah and ensuring the Torah's authenticity is not lost. So he and his court devoted their lives to teaching the Mishnah to the public, and they made sure that the Mishnah was the north star of the oral Torah. Now, when it comes back to the mitzvah of writing a Torah, remember we asked the question, what's the point of writing the Torah? Shouldn't the point be studying? So the Code of Jewish Law, which is Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Beis Yosef, which was the origin of the commentary of Jewish law, which eventually led to the book of Code of Jewish Law. So he actually says that the real mitzvah is not necessarily to write, but at least to have Jewish books. And he says it doesn't just apply to the written Torah. You don't just transcribe the 5 books of the Torah. You have to have the Mishnah. You have to have the Talmud and their commentaries. You have to have all of it. Because the purpose is that Torah shouldn't be forgotten, and to be a witness to God's connection to us, you can't just settle for it. You have to have all of it. Now that those books are available, we can't say, well, we don't need it because they didn't need it in the second temple or the first temple. Well, guess what? We're not living then. We're living now. We're living in a much darker time, and therefore we need those books. Those books are crucial. And according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's just as a mitzvah, a commandment, not just to write the 5 books, but to purchase and to transcribe all these books as well, which is why it's one package deal. So to answer the question of why the mitzvah has to be to write, not just to study, is because there's an idea of ensuring that the authenticity of Torah remains the same from when Hashem gave it to Moshe to now. So, when it talks about in the verse, back in the verse that we read in the beginning, when it talks about that, keep the words of the Torah in their mouths and let it bear witness to God, let the Torah be a witness to God. If you find a Torah scroll, Torah scrolls have been found from hundreds of years ago, from thousands of years ago, it is the exact same Torah you will find in any synagogue today. You can go to any synagogue today, whether Ashkenazic or Sephardic. Yes, the case is different. Ashkenazi Torahs are wrapped differently than Sephardic Torahs, but the scrolls themselves are exactly the same words. Whether it was 2,500 years ago, whether it was 3,000 years ago, whether it was 500 years ago, the same exact Torah. The same goes for the Talmud. The same goes for all the other commentaries. The authenticity of all of these books, of the values of Judaism, the values of Jewish law, and the values of Jewish ethics, and the values of the Medrash, and the lessons that we learn, and the values of Kabbalah, which is the deeper meaning of everything. All of that has not changed. And that's the idea of transcribing it. Even though, yes, technically it would be great if we didn't have to, if we were all able to learn from each other from an oral Torah and only have the written Torah being written. If that was in a perfect world, if Chizkiah was Mashiach and during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, or if Mashiach came when Moshe entered the land of Israel as he wanted to, and there was never an exile, of course, that's how it should have been. You have the written Torah and you have the oral Torah, and they're both kept the way they are. But because there was an exile, and because there was a horrific exile, there needed to be something to ensure the authenticity of Torah and the commentaries remain true to themselves and true as a witness to God. And that's why they all had to be recorded and be written. And that's why till today, they're exactly the same as they were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and so on. So now, I'm going to skip this one here. This is just another element to how Torah study changed from before the print house to afterwards. But actually, let's read this last paragraph. However, today, Torah scrolls are placed in the synagogue for congregational chanting. Therefore, the contemporary Jew of means is obligated to transcribe a book of Chumash, Mishnah, Talmud, and their commentaries to study with their children. So before the print house was invented I think it was in the 1500s or 1600s. I'm sure one of you know when it was invented. So before the print house was invented, everything was written by hand. So the mitzvah of writing was literal. You had to write not just the Torah, you had to write all the other books as well, because you needed to have the authenticity of Torah to study it. But by writing it, it was as if you were committing to the commitment and to the authenticity and to the uniformity of Torah and both written and oral Torah throughout the generations. But now that we have a print house, same rules apply. It's just that we print it instead of writing it. So it's a mitzvah to have a chumash in your home. It's a mitzvah to have a chumash that you bought. It's a mitzvah to have a Mishnah, a book of the Mishnah, a book of the Talmud. If you can't have the whole set, at least have one book. Code of Jewish law, books of Medrash, books of Kabbalah. These are all very important because this is how we fulfill the mitzvah of writing, of ensuring the connection, the authenticity of the way God gave us the Torah and the way it's been revealed to us by the sages throughout our generations, as a way of ensuring as a witness of God's connection to us through the Torah. So now, I'm going to skip this part 1 second. The second question we already dealt with a little bit, but yes, I want to continue. How are we able to write down the oral Torah? Look at the picture here, right? All these books. So we have the Talmud over here on the bottom. We have, I can't see what these books are. They could be the commentaries that Ramban. Most of them are art scroll books, but that's a book of the Talmud right there. That's a book of the Chafetz Chaim. That's a book of Psalms. So the Jewish library is gigantic, by the way. And I'm going to share something personal. When I was a teenager, so I had leukemia twice, and I was approached by Make-A-Wish, an amazing organization that provides a wish to children who have a life-threatening illness. And they asked me what my wish is. And I said, I want a complete Jewish library. And they're like, really? That's all you want? I'm like, fine, great. Of course, we'll do it. But we get a call, or my parents get a call not too long afterwards, like, are you sure you want the whole Jewish library? because they realized that the Jewish library is endless. The Chabad Jewish library alone, just the Chabad books was I think $20,000. Not to mention the art, the Moaznaim, Art Scroll, and all the other publishers, and all the commentaries, all the books on Torah are. And I'm just talking about Torah books. I'm not even talking about like stories or random Jewish. I'm talking about the holy books. The library is endless. So how are we able to record oral Torah, the oral narration of Torah, if it's if it's illegal? So let's use the mezuzah as an example. So what does the mezuzah say? So in the Shema, as we know, it says you should inscribe on your doorposts of your homes and your gates. That's all it says. That's the words of the scripture of the Torah about this mitzvah. What do we know about the mezuzah? How do we put up a mezuzah? It says before affixing a mezuzah to your doorpost, you have to recite the following blessing. Blessed are you, Hashem, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to affix a mezuzah. It doesn't say to write a mezuzah or to write on our doorpost. It says l'kvaya mezuzah. L'kvaya is from the word kavua, from like a establish. Affix is, I think, a loose translation. L'kvaya is like you set like if you have a spot that is your spot, that's your makam kavua. It's your established spot. It's your place. It's your seat. So l'kvaya mezuzah means that you're putting it there permanently. Obviously, you have to take it off to check it, but like it's you're establishing a mezuzah on your doorpost. We do not say blessing on the mezuzah when we write it, even though the mitzvah is to write. What does the mitzvah say? Saftam, to write on the doorposts. So when you're actually writing the mezuzah, you should really be making a blessing, but we don't. We make the blessing once we're affixing the mezuzah. Why is that? Because the mitzvah was taught to us through the sages, it was revealed to us through the sages, and the writing is important because it has to be part of the process of drawing down the blessings that are found in the Shema, and drawing down the connection that we have to Hashem by writing it. But ultimately, the purpose of the mitzvah is that there should be a mezuzah on your doorpost that you see every time you walk into your house. And that's why the blessing is for the impact. The blessing is for the finality of the mitzvah versus the steps that need to be taken to fulfill the mitzvah. It's for the finality of the mitzvah. That's why when we build a sukkah on Sukkot, we don't make a blessing when we build a sukkah, although we do say that we're doing this for this mitzvah. We say we're doing this l'shem kedushas mitzvah sukkah. We're doing this for the holiness of the sukkah. We make the blessing once we sit down and eat in the sukkah, because that's the purpose of the mitzvah. So the way the mitzvahs are elucidated to us through the narration of the sages ensure that it's not just about what it says, the words in the Torah, but it's making sure that we understand the core value behind it and the core reasons behind it, and that's reflected in the blessing on the mezuzah. So why is this? So how do we answer this question? How do we answer the question about how we're allowed to record the oral Torah? So just like when you write a Torah, even though writing a Torah is like receiving it from Mount Sinai, but let's not forget, when the Jews received the Torah from Mount Sinai, Moshe stayed up there for 40 days. Why? Because that's when he was being taught the entire Torah by God himself. And then he came down, and for 40 years, he taught it to the Jewish people. So it wasn't just about writing the Torah and receiving it from Mount Sinai. We have to study the Torah. So the mitzvah of writing a Torah is the impact or the purpose or the reason for the writing of the Torah, so we should study it. So if you write a Torah and you don't study it, then you're missing out on the most important part of the mitzvah. And this explains, and we'll get to the answer in a second, but this explains why we're allowed to record the oral Torah, why we were able to break that rule. Because what is the ultimate purpose? What is the ultimate purpose of writing a Torah, and what is the ultimate purpose of not writing the oral narration? Is because we're supposed to write down the words that were given to us by God as a witness, and then learn them and study them orally and transmit them orally. But if we're not able to do that, if our ability to communicate, because we're spread all over the world, is taken away from us, we still have a mitzvah to study Torah. We still have a mitzvah to study Torah in its complete form, which includes the oral narration. So we can't settle just for the written Torah to be written, because then we're not studying the Torah correctly. So the whole purpose of the mitzvah is being undone. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda Anasi decided that we need to write down the oral Torah, and that's why from then on the oral Torah was recorded, in writing, as a way to ensure that the purpose of writing the Torah, which is to study it, was being fulfilled. And that's the key. The key is that what God wanted is that we should be able to receive the Torah, which is the writing of it, but most importantly, to study it and to live it as a witness of God's connection to us. And that's how we connect our intellect to Hashem. There was a story that was a cute joke. So in many Orthodox or many traditional bar mitzvahs, so the bar mitzvah gifts that are given are Jewish, are holy books, Torah books. So there was one bar mitzvah boy that everybody was bringing him books. Someone brought him a set of the Chumash, someone brought him a set of Talmud, someone brought him a set of the Mishnah, someone brought him a set of Maimonides. And his grandfather comes and he has an umbrella. That's his gift. And somebody asked the grandfather, "Why? What's the point of your gift? Why are you getting him an umbrella?" So the grandfather said, "I want to make sure I'm getting him something that he's going to open." So it's not enough to just have the books and own the books. We have to actually study them, because that's the ultimate purpose of having the Torah. Ultimate purpose of writing the Torah is to study it. And the Sefer HaChinuch writes an explanation of this mitzvah. The reason for this mitzvah is well known that people behave according to what is prepared for them. Therefore, Hashem commanded that every Jew prepare a Torah scroll to have with him so that they can always read from it and not need to walk to our neighbor's home to borrow it. So once again, the idea of writing it was for ulterior motives, so we should study the Torah as easy as possible. The purpose is to learn to fear God, to know Him, to understand His commandments, and that are more precious and desirable than an abundance of fine gold. They were each commanded to write a scroll, even if our ancestors left us one. But why? So this is so that the scrolls proliferate among us, so that we can lend them to those who can't afford them and purchase them. The more, the merrier. Another reason is that if we each have new scrolls from which to study, lest we grow weary of the ancient scrolls of our ancestors left us. So this is from the Sefer HaChinuch, who wrote this about 1,000 years ago. But ultimately, the idea is true for all books of the Torah, that we need to have as many as we can, because the more books that we have, the more likely we are to study them, versus waiting to go to a friend's house or going to a synagogue or to a study hall. We should have these books available to us so we're able to study them and be able to constantly connect to Hashem's Torah, which is one big package. It's the 5 books of Moses. It's the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. It is the Nevi'im, the books of the prophets. It is the books of the scriptures, the 24 books of the written Torah. It is the Mishnah. It is the Talmud. It is Kabbalah. It is Medrash. It is the commentaries. It's Rashi. It's Rambam. It is the Rush. It is all of the great sages, all of their books, the Code of Jewish Law. They're all holy. They're all part of the same Torah. They're all from the same God, revealed through the sages, through the Ruach HaKodesh, through divine inspiration, to reveal God's desire, to reveal God's essence and God's wisdom through these books. So all of these books are holy. Don't let anybody ever tell you that this part of Torah is more important than that part of Torah. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you should study this and not that. Any book that was written by a holy person who has Ruach HaKodesh, where the book is considered to be holy, whether it's the Chavos Havavos, the duties of the heart, whether it's the book of Maimonides, whether it's a book of Kabbalah or a book of Chassidus. These are all holy books. They're all from the same God, and they're all part of the one package, the one gift of Torah that we have. And therefore, it's all, whatever is most inspiring to us, whatever is most uplifting to us, and will help keep us connected as best as we can. Those are the books that we should study. It's all one Torah. It's one package. I told you I had an agenda that's the agenda that I had with this discussion, even though there are many elements that we can learn from this. So the Rebbe goes on to say, studying from a book is easier and deeper, which is another reason why we had to write it down, because when you see it in front of you, it's much more memorable. So you should actually read it out loud, but read it from the book. One of the things that the Rebbe would always institute amongst in Chabad is that we shouldn't say prayers by heart. This is something I'm terrible in, honestly, but technically, the Rebbe would always want that we should daven, pray from the siddur, read it from the siddur, even if we know it by heart. The blessings as well, the after blessings and so on. We should always read it from the siddur, even if we know it by heart, because by reading it, the words come alive in front of us, and it has a much bigger, greater meaning than if we just say it by heart. And it helps us. It helps us with the concentration also when we read from a siddur. And that's why having newer books sometimes can be better for that, because if it's an old book and it's rusty and it's hard to read, it might prevent you from looking at it and studying it. So that's also something we don't want to do. Okay, let's go on. We're still in the crux of this, but we'll get to the final point in a minute. This is because the mitzvah to write a Torah for the purpose of studying from it, as the Torah says, teach it to your children of Israel, place it in their mouths. It is through the Talmud and commandments that we gain thorough understanding of the commandments. You cannot learn how to act as a Jew from just reading the written Torah. You need to have the commentaries. You need to have the Code of Jewish Law. You need to have the Sefer HaChinuch. You need to have these books in order to understand how to live as a Jew, and therefore they're just as important as the written Torah. And those are the books that we have to write and have to have available to us in our house. Okay. Now, I feel like we went backwards, but yeah, let's go straight to this. Now, Moshe Feinstein was one of the greatest Torah authorities of our generation, or at least the generation right preceding us. And here's another thing that he wrote: we can't know the oral Torah, the meaning of the written text, and its rules from studying the Torah scroll. Okay, and this is the bottom line. This is the point that we wanted to get to. You cannot learn Torah. You could open a book of Torah, you could read it, and you could understand it, and Rashi could explain it to you. But in terms of understanding the halacha, the way to practice as a Jew, you cannot do that just by studying the Torah, the written Torah. You need to have the oral narration to understand the Torah, and that's why we don't go for this whole scripture, like what does this verse mean, or that verse mean, or this verse mean, and what, like, we don't do that in Judaism. Because every single verse every single word, every single letter is a layer and layer of knowledge, of Jewish law, of lessons, of Kabbalistic meaning. There's so many layers to everything. So for us to think that we could just read a verse and somehow understand exactly what it's trying to tell us is ludicrous. And we need to have all of the oral narrations and explanations in order for us to understand it. Now, I'm going to skip this. This is basically how a Torah scroll is written, how difficult it is to write a Torah scroll, which is why we obviously will have it commissioned for us, or we're going to have a letter written for us. But now, to answer the question is, when the obligation to transcribe the Torah was modified to include other Torah books, now that requirement to write them did not remain. So ultimately, the mitzvah, this is a little contradictory, but the mitzvah to write a Torah, according to the Beis Yosef, according to the Shulchan Aruch, as we read earlier, is to include all of these other books. However, it doesn't necessarily fall under the same category as that original mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll. However, the ultimate purpose of writing the Torah scroll, which is to study Torah and to understand the Torah, is fulfilled through these other books, through the books of the commentary. So we need both. And therefore, we should strive to have as many Torah books as we possibly can. And here the Rebbe brings it home. In the early generations, the commandment, and now write for yourself a Torah scroll, this triggered many ancillary requirements, such as writing it with mindfulness on a tanned and scored sheet of parchment, writing the entire book, not just a portion, etc. In other words, the fact that we were writing a Torah scroll added many conditions and obligations, requirements to this mitzvah. It is self-understood that the mitzvah was modified to include all of the written Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the commentaries. The requirements that pertain to writing a Torah scroll did not carry over. We don't need to write these books ourselves, commission someone to write them for us or appear them. These books do not require such writing methods. You don't have to write a Mishnah on scroll or parchment. They don't even require a human to write them. You can print them with machines. They can be printed by machines, so long as the book is written in a written form. Even if it is accomplished by a monkey dancing on the keys, the obligation to study it and place it in their mouths can still be fulfilled by the book that is printed on your shelf. So for the oral Torah, the way it was written isn't as important as the written Torah. That's why it's the oral Torah, not the written Torah. However, the studying of Torah could be accomplished by reading and learning and studying any Torah book. Bottom line is like this: we want to fill our homes with Torah books as much as we can, because it's going to lead us to reading them and studying them, which is the ultimate purpose of writing a Torah in the first place. And the more Torah we learn, the more likely we are to fulfill the Torah and observe the Torah. But the fact is when you study Torah, any book of the Torah, you're connecting your intellect with God's intellect. And your connection with Hashem is in a way that is beyond any other way possible. So studying Torah is considered to be the greatest mitzvah, because your mind becomes God's mind. Assuming you're studying it correctly, and with the right mindset, and with humility, you are becoming part. Your brain is intertwined with Hashem. So having Torah books, even if you're not sure if you're going to study them, do it, because hopefully that will lead you to studying them, and that's what's most important. I'm going to skip this one because I want to get to the final piece here, which is that from everything we have learned, we can understand how important it is to encourage every Jew to have Torah books at home. The Rebbe campaigned for this, and this is one of the Rebbe's 10 mitzvah campaigns, is to have a house full of Torah books, and if possible, a home filled with Torah books. At the very least, every Jew must have the basic Torah text, the prayer book, the Torah itself, which includes all the Tanach, the Mishnah, the books of Jewish law. You need to have all of them, or at least the very basic ones. And then we must study them in order to place them in our mouths. And that's why one of the things we do in Chabad is that in every room, in every bedroom, even a child's bedroom, we place what's called a chitas. A chitas is a combined book that includes the Torah, it includes a book of the Psalms, it includes the Tanya, it includes the prayer book as well as a charity box, because it's like a set to ensure that this room is a holy room. This room is a room where God could feel comfortable. But in general, we have to remember that in our homes we must work to fill our shelves with kosher, holy books, because that is more to bring us more likely to studying them. It also makes our home more holy. But finally, and the final point I want to come to, I'm going to skip this. This is President Shazar of Israel, who was describing his library, how old the books were and how precious they were, and it's always been a facet in Judaism to ensure that we have Torah books in our home. But if you do not have a letter in the Torah, there's always a Torah being written, and there's a website dedicated to help people have a letter in the Torah. You could take open your phone and open the camera on your phone, and this is a QR code, and it will take you directly to that website. You could also type in the site that's on the screen, and you could purchase a letter in the Torah for $1. It's a Torah written wherever it's being written, and you'll get a certificate with your name that this letter and which letter in the Torah is yours. If you don't have one yet, it hasn't been done for you, make sure to do this, because that's how you fulfill the mitzvah of writing your own Torah. Obviously, this does not replace the fact of having Jewish books and holy books at your home to study them, and it does not replace Torah study at all, but at least it ensures that we fulfill the writing part of the mitzvah, and then we can move on to the studying Torah part of the mitzvah. So that is the practical takeaway from this class. Please make sure you have a letter in the Torah, and please, maybe everyone on the class should take on to purchase an additional Torah book to have at home. Even if you haven't studied all the books that you have already, it's not a bad thing to add more. It makes your home holy, and it will encourage you to study Torah and keep that connection to Hashem. So may this Shavuos, the holiday Shavuos of receiving the Torah, may we internalize and receive the Torah with, on an external level, on an internal level, but ultimately it should have the impact on the world that it's meant to have, which is elevating the world to a godly world where the knowledge of God will be pursued, and that's going to finalize and ultimately bring about its ultimate intention with the coming of Mashiach. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Good Shabbos, good Yom Tov.
Shabbos, good Yom Tov. Thank you so